Hey, welcome back. Now joining us this morning is Althea Rizzo. She is the Geologic Program Coordinator for the Oregon Department of Energy Management. Good morning, Althea.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for having me.
Of course, it's wonderful having you on the show. Now, Governor Tina Kotek recently proclaimed February to be Tsunami and Earthquake Awareness Month. What can you tell us about what you do for the state of Oregon and why that announcement matters to you?
Yeah, so my job is to talk about earthquakes, tsunamis, and volcanoes a lot. So I do everything from, helping create response plans, recovery plans, looking at doing public education and outreach, doing technical support. So I'm kind of a jack of all trades when it comes to geohazards.
Absolutely. So for anyone out there who's never given a second thought about earthquakes, what's a good first step towards preparedness?
So the first step to preparedness is really just understanding what the hazards are in your area so you know what you are preparing for. There's a lot of general preparedness tips like make a plan, have some food, have some water. But if you're in the tsunami zone, your preparedness might be a little bit different than somebody who's in a wildland fire zone. So just knowing your hazard is really the first step to being much more prepared.
Absolutely. And so how has our responses to tsunamis and earthquakes kind of evolved over time?
Yeah, so I have been doing this work for about 17 years, and we've really come a long way here in Oregon and really all along the West Coast. When I first started, 17 years ago, they were just developing the inundation maps for tsunamis so we would know what would be inundated during a tsunami event. And now we are starting to put in, physical mitigation efforts in for our infrastructure. For instance, we're building vertical evacuation structures. We are hardening routes. We're educating people. We're planning for debris. So we've come a really long way in just, the last couple of decades.
Yeah, and how is Oregon kind of unique in our preparedness that we need to know in order to prepare for earthquakes and for tsunamis?
So the one thing to remember is we know that these large earthquakes happen over and over again. And so we know that we need to get prepared for this. And we've seen other countries get their populations, get their peoples ready for these kinds of events. I mean, Japan, for instance, is a great company or Japan, for instance, is a great country to look for some inspiration on how to really motivate the public to practice those tsunami evacuation routes, for instance, because we see in the 2011 event in Japan, communities that practiced annually getting out of the inundation zone had a much higher survival rate. So it's just working with our people, working with the government to harden our infrastructure so that roads and bridges will still be there after the earthquake and tsunami.
Absolutely. Now, many Oregonians worry about a potentially devastating earthquake occurring off the coast. What advice would you give anyone anxious about what they call the big one?
Well, the first thing so the first thing is to not get so anxious or so worried that you don't prepare, because there is so much that we can do to get prepared, even for something as big and scary as Cascadia can be for some people. And it doesn't have to take big efforts to get started. You can do something today that's not going to cost you any money so that when you wake up tomorrow, you're more prepared. So that could be pulling together a pair of leather gloves or just some sturdy gloves, putting with an old pair of shoes, putting that into a shopping bag and tying it to the bedpost of your bed so that if an earthquake happens tonight or a fire or anything else, you've got shoes and gloves, a headlamp right there by your bed so you can hop right into them and not have to worry about cutting your feet, cutting your hands, and having a way to be able to see at night.
Absolutely. And they call it the big one for a reason. So what is unique about that earthquake specifically off the coast?
So they call it the big one because what we have is a subduction zone right off of the Oregon coast. And that subduction zone runs from Northern California all the way up to British Columbia. And the size of the earthquake is related to the size of the fault zone that can create that earthquake. So we know that this earthquake can be at least a 9.0, which is what we saw in Japan in 2011. And that is going to shake the entire Pacific Northwest. They are going to feel this earthquake in Idaho. And we know from, watching these kinds of earthquakes around the world, pretty much what we can expect to see, that the shaking for 2 to 4 minutes, the tsunami coming in shortly after that, and then the long time to recover. So the more that we, retrofit and fix our utilities, our infrastructure, our bridges, our roads, that's less that's going to break when that bad day happens.
Yeah, and what is your favorite part about working with a job at the state of Oregon?
My favorite job really, my favorite part of the job is getting out and talking to people because they're anxious, and having a conversation with them and helping to allay their fears so that they can take those steps to get better prepared, because we can all help each other in some way to get better prepared.
Yeah, and is there anything else you'd like to tell us before we say goodbye to you this morning?
So preparedness doesn't have to be big and scary. Like I said, you can do something today that's not going to cost you any money. Just go through your junk drawer in your kitchen and see what you have and pull that all together. And then that way you wake up tomorrow, you'll be much more better prepared. The other thing to do is just talk to your housemates, talk to your family members, talk to people in line at the grocery store about this and how you are getting better prepared.
Well, Althea, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Now, as Althea said, February is Tsunami and Earthquake Awareness Month in Oregon. It is a great time. Make sure you have everything you need in case of seismic activity or any emergency situation for that matter. Find resources, including the 2 weeks ready toolkit at oregon.gov/OEM. Althea, thank you again so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. We'll be right back.